The following is a GoPowerCat.com production.
It is 56 in Lawrence, Kansas, 77 in sunny Houston. In Manhattan, Kansas, it's 54 degrees, and here at Studio 73 here in Frisco, Texas, it's 73 degrees. Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Appreciate it. This is Brien Hanley, Big 12 Insiders, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Today, we are with our friends, Michael Swain and Rob Sellers. How are you guys doing, fellas?
Doing well. Getting ready for another busy weekend of Big 12 basketball.
Every weekend. It never stops, man. It just never stops. This conference is absolutely amazing. So I appreciate you guys taking the time out to join us today. So we're going to dive right into this and talk a little bit about the Big 12 officiating. Look, every coach, every fan constantly is going to complain about officiating. It's just the way that it is. Hey, if the call doesn't go my way, the officials are crazy. They're out of their mind. What are they thinking? But this year, it seems to be that the officiating in the Big 12 has just been so inconsistent. And I think the coaches, it's driving them even more bananas. I'll start with you, Rob, because, you know, obviously the big glaring thing that we saw was Kelvin Sampson just losing his mind, just walking out on the court and just saying enough is enough. So I'll kind of let you give a little breakdown of maybe, I don't know, let you give a breakdown of what you thought, maybe what his mindset was, because it just seemed like, again, it just seemed like he's like, enough is enough.
Yeah, and not just out on the court, but to the other end of the court, no less.
Yeah.
Where the action was, and didn't just step out on the court. He pretty much was following the ref. I mean, he seemed pretty. You know, I don't want to put any thoughts into his brain, but he seemed pretty hell bent in the moment to get his point across to the referee and the other officials over there. Like you said, it's been building. It's been consistently inconsistent. I think that, like you said, that's caused a lot of problems. But I've never really seen Kelvin Sampson. And of course, you know, he's been here a while, but I haven't seen and remembering him some when he was at Oklahoma. Obviously, that was close enough to pay attention to for me. I just don't know. I'm sure he's had big blowups before in his life. Don't get me wrong, but I've never really seen that quickly just go from 0 to 100. We kind of, like I was telling you guys just a while ago before we came on, I thought in the moment, I even posted on the board in our game thread, jokingly, almost half-heartedly, you know, they were already playing a ton of backups in that game. They were up by 20. I thought maybe jokingly halfway that he saw an opportunity to get Kellen in there and get Kellen some experience. He's the head coach in waiting. And so it turned out great as it was and all that. But, I don't know that I've seen that from him before to that level. Obviously, he's always been a fire coach. He talks and screams constantly like any other basketball coach. Sure. He's very hard on his players. He demands a lot from them. But you always see it translate into such a good relationship in the end with him and the players. And I don't know if I've seen him act like that towards the refs before. Obviously, coaches do what they do. But man, that was about as much as I've ever seen from him.
Yeah, I just thought that it was. I just think again, enough is enough. I just think he went over the edge. Obviously, went over the line. But a lot of times coaches do those things to prove a point, or to make a point. And I think, Michael, I think seeing that from Kelvin Sampson, he's such an accomplished coach. Yes, he's intense, but he's such an accomplished coach that you're thinking, well, why would he do that? Well, I think there was some intent or a message that he's trying to leave in that circumstance.
Yeah, because you look at the foul that it takes place like right after, and it's a foul that should have been called. But
Correct.
It's not one you're thinking, oh my gosh, this coach is going to lose his mind because of it.
Right.
But I think Robbie hit it on the head. Like, that's about as free of a shot as you're going to get this season in the Big 12 to just let an official have it, because his team's up by a bunch. Yeah. Right. They're not coming back. Your team's got it. Like, they're going to be able to win the game without you. So why not let the officials have it? And we're at that point in the season now where, it's halfway. And I feel like we're at that kind of stage where there's a lot of pent up, I think, emotions with a lot of these coaches. And you've seen some of these officiating crews 2-3 times now, maybe even more if you count non-conference play. The rapport, I think, is starting to build up with a lot of these coaches and a lot of these officials. And I think you're just seeing that frustration level really start to build. I mean, look, Scott Drew is not someone that I think should ever probably be ejected from a basketball game. And he got ejected for a technicality, right? Being out of his coaching area. When you look at the video of it, and it's hilarious to watch because you look at what Scott Drew does and he looks back, he puts his toe on the line of the coaching box. So he's technically in it, but he's not. And they just toss him because of it. And it's okay. First of all, Scott Drew, let's not toe the line literally. But also, it's the end of a tough game between Iowa State and Baylor. Let the coach just coach. Why are you trying to take things into your own hands, be the center of attention? And I just think the coaches are starting to get fed up with it. I mean, I'd love to see a number of the technical fouls have been called, but I saw a stat that teams playing against Iowa State have had their coaches get a technical foul in 4 straight games.
Oh, wow.
Right? What does that tell you about the style of play that Iowa State has, which is physical, like a lot of Big 12 teams? But what does it say about their style of play and the way it's being officiated that leads to opposing coaches being so pissed off about it? I just think it's really interesting in the way that things are being officiated and the result it's having on some of these games.
Yeah. The one thing about it, it's the inconsistency of the physicality. I think that's what I believe drives coaches mad. Is that, okay, if you're going to let it be physical, number one, let it be physical on both ends. And number two, don't change it up from half to half and let the players have to try to adjust. That's the one thing that you always hear is the first half, oh, man, they were letting you get away with anything. And it's almost like the refs look, oh, okay, well, we called 6 fouls in the first half. We got to make that up in the second half. And well, hold on a second. You just let us get away with almost murder in the first half, just beating up guys all over the place. In the second half, if I just accidentally bump a guy on the screen, you're calling fouls. It's just okay, well, what's going on here? And I mean, it's just the inconsistencies. Look, it's just like you mentioned, Michael, about Scott Drew. It's Jerome Tang's the same thing. It's the guy's getting teched up. You're giving him. I mean, I don't know. It just, look, Jerome Tang may have been asking for a technical. I know the second one he wasn't. I mean, he's just look, you're doing this to our guy. Why are you telling him this? Almost you're trying to embarrass a player. And that's where another thing about the officials, and I think this is where fans get so upset, is that officials try to interject themselves into the game and try to be a part of the game when we all know officials are best. They're best to be seen, not heard. Yeah, we know you're out there, but unless there's something egregious, let it go. We don't want you to be part of the game unless you have to be. And I think a lot of times, Michael, these refs are trying to interject themselves to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think your point too, right on the first second half thing is it's spot on, because how many times have you seen a game this year that it's great basketball in the first half? It's free flowing. Yes, it's physical. Yes, there are probably some times where they let them play, but who didn't love the first 8 minutes of that KU K-State game on Monday
Absolutely.
night when there was not even a whistle? They went through one media timeout, right, where they didn't stop the game. That was awesome. Who didn't love that? What people didn't love is the second half of that game when all of a sudden it's ticky-tacky fouls when it's 2 rivals going at it. Let them play. And I think that game, I don't think either coach came out afterwards and talked about it. I think both coaching staffs would probably agree that was a pretty poorly officiated game for both teams. Just a lot of ticky-tack stuff here, and then someone gets clobbered and it's not a foul. Just some stuff that's just not very consistent. And that, for me, is super concerning, because then it's a question of, well, why isn't there consistency? Do you not understand the rules? Are you choosing to let stuff slide at certain points? Because I feel like with officiating, if you're going to do it to the book, it should be throughout the whole game. There shouldn't be times you're oh, well, let's let them play here, or, oh, let's stop the game and have it be choppy. There's such an impact on that. And I think the Big 12 can be such an up and down league. It really can. These teams want to get out in transition, push the pace, rile up the pressure. And it's when those officials inject themselves into the game and slow it down, and all of a sudden it's a procession to the free throw line and there's guys getting in foul trouble, right? How many times have different teams all of a sudden late in the game, it's like, oh, well, so-and-so star player can't play right now. There's 7 minutes left in the game. Star player can't play. He's got 3-4 fouls because maybe there was a 50-50 ball that they called the foul on, or there's something that shouldn't have been officiated that way. So I think overall, like, the lack of consistency is probably the most concerning thing, big picture. And I know, on our TV show on Sundays in Topeka, Fitz has talked about an academy of some sort for officials to allow former players to get back into it, to allow some way for these people to have the proper education and the proper learning to be able to execute. Because if you have the best officials, you're going to have an even better product, and fans are going to want to stick around and watch, because guess what? It's going to be fun basketball. It's not going to be like the equivalent of Big Ten football. It's going to be different. And so I just think it's concerning that this is like a type of topic you have to have on a show where it's such prevalent throughout the conference that it has to be talked about.
Absolutely.
To be fair, if I could interject one more thing real quick before we move on, I think that a little bit of what we're seeing, and Michael, you bring it up with them seeing each other already now, these officials, these teams a few times, and also being midway through the season. I think you're seeing some posturing on both ends here. You're seeing the referees trying to posture and make sure that they keep control of everything, and they know that the coaches know they're the ones that are in charge. You see them trying to prove that, as well as the coaches trying to posture as well, because to provide a little context for that Kelvin Sampson play, the play before that I think truly boiled him over before he took the opportunity to let it boil over was the undercut over there on the offensive end of Javier Francis, who was knocked out of the previous game for about 75% of the game. He was fine in the end, but at the time, obviously, I believe that was the Kansas game, and to lose him for that extended period like that, obviously Kansas was I don't know if anybody was going to stop him that night anyway, but I don't know if Francis would have made much difference in the game, but still, to lose one of your starters like that because of the undercutting. And I know like you guys were talking about with the physical play that's going on, Houston obviously is known also for that physical defense, and I know the fans appreciate when they do let them play a little bit and let them do their style of play. But like Michael said, you got to either let it go or you don't. You can't pick and choose moments of the game to be in control and put yourself into the game.
Right. Well, and I know, that I don't want to just leave this to be a Big 12 issue either. Because I think it's kind of what you said, Michael, and I've said this for years. Go to schools and put together a package all the way from the top level all the way down at universities and get former players involved. Look, everybody's not going to play professional basketball or football, whatever it is. They're not. Some of those guys can be really good officials. And I've said the same thing for years. And people accuse me of bashing on people, of older people. I'm like, I'm not bashing on anybody older. I'm just saying your eyesight and your hand-eye coordination doesn't get better as you get older. And I go, and the officials keep getting older, the players stay the same. I go, at some point, we've got to try to change that a little bit and get some younger officials. Now, good, again, they got to be experienced, and you get that experience. But I think if they dug into universities, Rob, I think that they could absolutely find officials from former players or just anybody. You don't even have to be a former player, just anybody. Just put together, NCAA, put together a package and get into these universities and say, hey, we're training to be officials. You're going to be a big-time official. Not to mention, those guys aren't broke. They make good money officiating, basketball, football. They make good money doing that. That's a profession. I go, so they can do that stuff. I just think the NCAA's got to start doing that.
That's true. There's ways that they could do that. And I don't think officials, especially when you take it even further down, like the high school level, which is where some of these guys start, I guess, to move their way up. But officials, I know, at least down here in Texas, it's not an abundance anymore. It's becoming harder and harder to find people willing to officiate at the lower levels to build their way up. Because of course, not to shift the whole pivot of the show, but society as a whole right now and the abuse that they take at that level,
absolutely,
so many are probably driven out before they ever even get the opportunity to advance up that ladder.
Yep, absolutely. I feel the same way because I go to a lot of high school games here in Frisco, and I see it. I mean, and you talk to them, and they're just like, "Look, you can't find officials. You'll see them doing Friday or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and because they just can't get enough." And unfortunately, especially at that level, it's I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think it's more of a parent thing. Parents get involved and just bash on these people and treat them just pathetic. And I always think, man, when I was growing up, like my mom and dad and my friends' parents, they didn't do that. And then I think, what is going on here? And then I think, heck, I'm 48 years old. It's my age. It's my friends. They're the one. We are the ones that are doing the bashing. I'm like, where did we even learn that kind of stuff from? It's crazy.
It's definitely a two-way street, right? Where so much of it is about respect, right? And I think the reason people don't want to get into it is because they don't feel respected. And that's probably a broader issue, like you're mentioning there, Brien. And I think the way you can fix that to some degree, right, is making sure that the respect factor in college and pros, right, is earned. Because first of all, if they do have some sort of certificate, if there are different levels and notches, and also if they continue to be compensated well, then you can continue to keep people around. And I think that's probably kind of the old, is the juice worth the squeeze, especially for the high school officials. I don't know, but for college specifically, I just think it's broadly an issue, whether it be through college basketball, college football, just general college athletics. It's kind of at that inflection point where it's not professional in terms of the people you're working with, in terms of the financial gain you have from it. And so I think it's probably something where there's got to be investment before the reward, I think, probably can be felt from it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Absolutely. And getting back to, again, the college level of it, it's just, I don't want to say that it's troubling when you go from conference to conference, but it kind of is. And I think that's where people get in trouble in like the NCAA tournament. We're talking basketball officials. When you go to the NCAA tournament, when you get physical teams from physical conferences, a lot of times they have trouble because they'll get refs from another conference where it's not as physical. I think that's part of it, where it's got to be more uniform nationwide is what we're looking for. I know that they say, okay, the Big 12 is physical, and maybe like the Big East is physical. The ACC, not as much. They talk about the Big 10 is, but the Pac-10 maybe isn't as much. Well, then you get a Pac-10 officiating crew, and you're playing against them, and you're from one of these physical conferences. It becomes a problem. And it's just like, okay. And then next thing you know, you got three guys with 2 fouls in the first 8 minutes of the game, and then you're struggling, and we're talking, this is the NCAA tournament here. It's like, and I get it. Yes, you have to adjust in game, and you probably should have somebody on your staff saying, hey, these are the guys that are going to be officiating. Guys, we can't be as physical. But at the same time, it's hard to teach kids and say, hey, don't be physical when that's what you've done all season long and it's been okay. And then now all of a sudden you're telling them, hey, we got to back off. And maybe that's not even the style that they're capable of playing up to the best of their ability, is to back off. I think it's got to be more universal, Rob. We've got to do so. I know they try, so I don't want to just sit here and bash on officiating because that's tacky. But I think it's just got to be better.
Yeah, and like you mentioned with some of the styles in the Big 12, I know just from personal experience, Kelvin Sampson does everything he can to get these guys through the year built to what they want to be in March and to play full out this style of basketball. And so, like you said, to go into another officiating situation, even if it's coming, it's difficult. Coaches are coaches, and they're going to make adjustments game to game anyway, but to completely change your style and what you've preached all year and for years for some of these guys, to try to back that off a little bit in a certain situation, it creates more frustration. And there you go, where now you've got frustrated coaches, you've got frustrated players, and it's a weird circle. But it's an interesting question. I wonder if maybe if there's an opportunity there for them. It sounds silly. I mean, we've all heard some of the sillier degrees you can get in college as it is, especially when you're an athlete. I mean, why not something that's officiating related? And maybe it's partnered with the NBA or the NCAA.
Yes.
Where after you've, like you said, after you've obtained this certificate or whatever, this degree, then you don't have to break in at the high school level and get beat up for 4 or 5 years before you prove your point and, move on to a little bit higher level type thing. Maybe that's an option.
I've said it forever. I believe in that wholeheartedly, Rob. Look, a degree is a degree. A way of living is a way of living. That's the way that I look at it. I know that people may laugh at this, but I'm like, if that's what you want to do with your life is to be an official, then okay. And I don't think there would be anything wrong with officiating and being able to get a degree. It's like you said, we've seen everything. Guys getting degrees, and not just athletes, people in general. You get a degree in anything. I mean, my wife is the perfect example. She's got a degree in psychology. She doesn't do anything even remotely close to that with her profession and never has. So it is what it is. I get it. I think we got to do something. I just think we got to do something. Again, I don't want to be the person that just bashes on officials all the time, even though while I'm watching a game, the officials can do no right. But at the same time, I just think there's got to be a way that we can make it more uniform nationwide to give it some uniform, just to make it a level playing field, Michael. I just think we have to do something because, again, we're seeing these coaches, and like you said, they're getting technicals at high rates, can't understand what's going on. Then what I think drives them even more mad is I saw a play last night or 2 nights ago on a goaltending call between Louisville and Syracuse. It clearly wasn't goaltending. They went and reviewed it. You saw that it wasn't goaltending. There was only 3 seconds left in the game, and they called it goaltending anyway. I'm like, gee, it's stuff like that. It's like, well, wait a second. It just don't even do a replay if you're going to do that because you could clearly see that it wasn't. There was no, and it's just, oh my gosh, it's like, what are we doing here? What are we doing?
Seems like there's even a bigger need now for officials than ever. Sorry to cut you off. There might just
you're right.
With the expanded G League, with all these other smaller leagues and stuff that are popping up, you need better refs more and more across. So
you do.
Maybe there's.
You definitely do.
I wonder how long until TV networks get involved, right? Because it impacts the product, and that impacts the product, impacts the viewers, and it impacts the dollar.
Yep.
Like I do wonder at some point if there is a way that, TV companies, they're diving into getting in a lot of different things these days. So I don't know if there's a time at which there is kind of an inflection point that changes if people are not tuning in college games anymore because they're like, I don't want to watch this because it's just not fun to watch. And I wonder if there is a point in time where that comes that, if networks start thinking, hey, well, how can we take a step towards fixing this so we can start making money again? That's the thing too, that maybe can impact it.
The thing about it is, first of all, you're 1,000% correct, Michael, is they will do that. And what they will do is they'll go to the NCAA first and say, hey, we're not seeing the numbers that we want to see. And this is why, this is what we think is why you need to do something to fix this. Otherwise, we're going to take our money elsewhere. And they will make a change. It's unfortunate that it has to come to that, but the world revolves around money, unfortunately, and that's the way that it is. But you're 1,000% correct. That'll happen if it hasn't already, but that will happen. They'll step in and say, you got to fix this. We're not seeing what we want to see, and this is why you got to make changes. And then the changes will come. So we're going to take a quick break here. We'll come back on the other side, and we'll dive into some actual hoops and stop bashing on officials after we take a quick break from our partners at Synergy Financial.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right. Thank you guys for coming back again. This is Big 12 Insiders, sponsored by Synergy Financial Partners. All right, fellas, let's dive into something fun here. Let's take a step back from crushing on officials. Let's talk about some basketball. Obviously, Big 12 is the best conference in the league. I am not gonna. We don't need to keep going down and beating that horse. Let's talk about games that are coming up here on Saturday. So, took a look. I mean, it seems like every Saturday, it seems like every game, there's always a great game going on. This league is so good. But taking a look at some of these games, I'm looking down here. TCU goes to Iowa State. Iowa State is playing good basketball right now. West Virginia at Texas. You would say that Texas, that's the one game, of the weekend that, we think Texas should win that one pretty handily. But we know that everybody in this conference somehow, some way, can always beat somebody else. It doesn't really matter. But I'm looking down the road here. Rob, I'll start with you. The one game that I'm looking at, two physical teams that love to rebound the basketball. Houston's going to Tennessee, or not Tennessee. Houston's going to Cincinnati. I think that one has potential to possibly be an upset. I know Houston is better than Cincinnati, but on the road in Big 12 conference, anything can happen.
Yeah, I imagine Houston, when they got the schedule and they looked down the schedule and they saw this stretch coming up that was at Texas, followed by at Kansas, and then they saw at Cincinnati coming down the road after the home game with Oklahoma State, and they thought, there you go, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, we're familiar, surely they're not as strong coming into this jump to the Big 12, and lo and behold, Cincinnati's playing some pretty good basketball.
Yes, they are.
And although they may be familiar foes, there probably will be no love lost. I mean, they've never had any issues, of course, but I think they both are in the midst of where they're fully enough in. They definitely know what they've gotten themselves into. Right. And both of them have kind of settled in and playing decent basketball right now. So it matches up better maybe now than it did when you first saw the schedule. Houston's going to have to come in there and play their brand of basketball and hope that they can respond differently. I think they took a little longer than they should have, or maybe that would have been conducive for them getting a win, as if that was likely to happen anyway up in Kansas. But still, the fact that they let Kansas get going so much before they were finally able to settle in a bit and get into their stuff, you got to avoid that early wave you get on the road when you got the home team and they're amped coming in. Of course, Cincinnati's going to want to bring Houston in and be like, yeah, we beat these guys before. Here they are ranked top 5, whatever, just as soon beat them as the next guy. So there will be no shortage of things to amp the crowd up and amp Cincinnati up for the game. So, Houston's going to have to do a good job of withstanding that early wave of energy and all that in the arena and hitting some good shots to kind of slow the crowd down a little bit and then get into their brand of basketball.
Absolutely. So, Michael, obviously, I think one of the biggest games in the country is coming up on Saturday. Definitely the biggest game in the conference. Baylor coming to Lawrence. Baylor, good basketball team coming off a big win. As we mentioned, Scott Drew getting ejected last Saturday. But Kansas coming off that game against Kansas State. Look, Kansas State, I don't think either team played well. I'll be quite honest with you. I don't think it was that good of a basketball game. I was saying all along Kansas State needed somebody to have an extraordinary game for them to have a chance to win. That happened. Tyler Perry played outstanding basketball, especially in the second half he did. I just don't think it was one of Kansas's best games. I think Kansas fans would probably agree coming in. But to this Baylor game, I think it'll be something different. Back at home, big game. It's usually a thing that Kansas usually steps up and plays well.
Yeah, these are kind of the principal plays, right? If you're into sports gambling, if you live in Kansas, you can do that.
Thanks,
you lay it out right for the casual fan who maybe isn't following Kansas, and it's a home game, which this team has been really, really good in Allen Fieldhouse. It's a game against Scott Drew, who has not been great at Allen Fieldhouse. And you put in all these kind of factors, you start plugging it in, right? 5 p.m. tip-off time, college game day in town. And it gives me the feeling of some of these Kansas Baylor games more of recent years where they actually haven't been very good games. I
Right.
don't like, maybe for me, the last really good Kansas Baylor game was maybe 2017 at home for KU. Like, it's been a long time since this has been a nail biting game start to finish, because typically what happens is either Kansas gets off to an incredibly fast start and builds out a really big lead and they're able to hold it, or maybe Baylor chips away at it a little bit, but KU kind of keeps maybe a 10-point advantage, or it's really close in the first half. And then, like I believe it was last year, where then KU in the second half comes out, they lock down LJ Cryer, and they basically are able to pull away in the second half. And for KU, like, this is going to be another one of those kind of get right games where after losing to K-State, like, Bill Self talked a lot about energy at practice this week, and they got Tuesday and Wednesday off. So 2 days off, they get back Thursday, and all of a sudden Self's talking all about energy. You guys have to bring more energy, more intensity than you brought at K-State on Monday. And, you know, Self has his way of pushing buttons for his players, and you can kind of just tell when he's doing it, especially because it's when he starts talking about it with reporters. And I know KU's going to come out with a ton of energy, and they're going to play with their hair on fire to start the game. And I just don't know if this Baylor team is good enough defensively to contend with that, and then also be able to keep pace, because when this KU team is turned up defensively, they're good. Like, you know, I've got some of the numbers here, but basically since Johnny Furphy's been in the starting lineup, you know, KU has been really good, and their offense has been the fourth best offense in the country since Furphy became the starter. And their defense has been a lot better too. So it's like a team that is starting to click on all cylinders, and it's just that road factor that they got to figure out. But this team at home, like, I don't see them losing at home this year. And I think their biggest test was Houston, and my God, they played like the best game they've played under Bill Self in several years. So
Speaking of Johnny Furphy.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
God, I mean,
good grief.
that was the game for him too. So this is a KU team that plays well at home. They need the energy because these starters play too many darn minutes. And it's just kind of one of these games that has a lot of recipes for a KU win.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. I look for KU to get back to playing. Again, it's not that they don't play physical. I just think they're getting back to playing better defense. And they played pretty well against K-State. K-State just turns the basketball over at an alarming rate. Speaking of K-State, they're going to BYU on Saturday. They got to play well. They can't – if they turn the ball over 16, 17 times at BYU, they're going to get blown out because BYU will get on a roll. They'll get the shooters going. They're at home. They'll start making a bunch of shots, and it can get ugly. K-State has a path to win that basketball game, no doubt. If they lock down defensively and take care of the basketball, they absolutely can win that basketball game. Having said that, it's going to be difficult. BYU is pretty good. I think they're one of the teams – I mean, they're a metrics darling, but they actually are playing good basketball. That's the thing. You know, it's one thing to be a metrics darling, but then lose a bunch of basketball games and people still say, well, you know, not that good. BYU is really good. They're a good basketball team. I think they might even be, Michael, maybe the surprise of the Big 12 conference this year as far as teams being good. I would say argue that with UCF. UCF, I mean, you turn around and you look at UCF, it's like, okay, they're 4-5 in the conference. If they can somehow maybe even get to 8-10 with the wins that they have, they got to be a tournament team, don't they?
Yeah, I agree. I think BYU has been the surprise because you look at their non-conference schedule and what they were able to do through non-con play. It was kind of had that feeling to me, at least, of, okay, BYU is going to do well in non-con play, and then they're going to get in conference play, and then they're going to lose a bunch of games. And they've been in a lot of these games, and I think this K-State BYU matchup is so interesting because you saw KU have a bunch of trouble finishing around the paint when K-State had those two big lineups out there. Well, BYU doesn't have their shot blocked very often.
Right.
I think they're number 8 in the country. I was reading this earlier today. They're number 8 in the country in block shot rate. Like, they don't have their shots blocked at all on offense. So, like, that's a game where it's kind of like the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. And I think BYU is a team that has an identity. They're really good offensively. Defensively, don't have guys that really put a lot of pressure on you. They don't really block a ton of shots, but they're just kind of a team that I think can really score the ball. And when their 3-point shot is falling, like they're a tough team to beat. And I think the fact that that game's in Provo, like that could be a win for BYU. And then all of a sudden you're looking at, for K-State, like, can they go in there and replicate some of the things they did against KU, or whether it be the shot making, I think in some points during the game, they didn't turn the ball over a ton. So there are ways K-State can win that game, but I think BYU definitely for me has like been a team that you look at the record, right, at 4-5 in the conference. It's not super impressive, but I think they're a much better team than that 4-5 record shows.
Yeah, I think so too. I think obviously they're going to be favored to win the game, and there's more ways for BYU to win that game than K-State. I think people don't talk about that kind of stuff enough. There's more ways for them to win. Having said that, it's still basketball. You still got to go out there and do it. Before I let you guys go, one thing that I wanted to talk about is the Big 12 tournament. We haven't really broken down. We've talked about NCAA bids and all of that stuff, but we haven't talked about the Big 12 tournament. I don't remember the last time that don't get me wrong, the Big 12 tournament is always really good. It's always fun. It's always good. I don't know that I'm going to see a time where I've seen an in-conference, in-season tournament or end-of-the-season tournament that's going to be, number one, is wide open, but as good as what this Big 12 tournament is going to be. I'll start with you, Rob. What do you think about this? I mean, is this the best that we've seen in ages as far as an in-conference tournament?
Absolutely. And of course, Houston coming into the Big 12, they knew what they were getting themselves into.
Right.
And we all knew what it, when we knew the teams were coming. And just to say that, hold your breath, because next year, I know you're losing Texas and Oklahoma, right? But you're also bringing in Arizona and all these other schools that are going to add just as much. And, it depends on year to year, obviously, where you're going to add it. But I don't know if any team in the country could be prepared to head into the Big 12 tournament. I mean, it's just such as if it's not been hard enough for the new teams and any regular team in the Big 12. The week in and week out, every week you play 2 games, and at least one of those is going to be, probably just a fight to the death.
Yes.
And a lot of times twice a week. So
correct.
To head into a tournament like that, where, man, you want to talk about how valuable those the early bye is going to be. How valuable is it going to be able to lock one of those up, because any rest you can get, any little bit like that, because each game in that tournament is, top to bottom. It's just going to be a fight. Everyone's going to kick it up that next level too at that time of year. And so by then everybody is who they are, and they're about as seasoned and as well oiled of a machine as they're going to be. So man, it's going to be a heck of like you said, the biggest thing I agree with what you said there is wide open. Like literally, you might mark a couple teams off the bottom that you don't think they could, but just as easily, depending on how early things go, just about any team could make a run here and win the title.
Well, here's the thing too, like the bids aren't going to be solidified.
Yeah,
like there's a very good chance that like there could be 4 Big 12 teams going into the Big 12 tournament for 2 bids in the tournament, in the NCAA tournament, right? For at-large bids. And you could be looking at 2 teams playing each other in the Big 12 tournament, right, to advance, but also knowing that if they win that game, there's a very good chance that win will help them get into the actual NCAA tournament. So to some degree, it's going to be like the Big 12 tournament meets kind of the first 4 before the first 4 type of thing. Right? Like I'm fired up for it. And I think the best thing for Big 12 teams is that it ends on Saturday, because I was starting to plan some stuff for NCAA tournament travel, and like I kind of forget sometimes how quick that first round game can come. Right? If you're playing one of those Thursday sites, that means you're traveling on Tuesday. And if if the Big 12 tournament got moved to a Sunday, you're looking at Monday being your day off. And then you're traveling. It's pretty crazy. So I think this Big 12 tournament is going to be wild. I'll bring my binoculars for whenever we're up in the skybox so we can maybe see what's going on the floor. But it should be a really fun tournament.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it myself. I just, first of all, Kansas City does a great job of putting the Big 12 tournament on as a whole. But secondly, just for the number of teams, I think all the games for the most part, it's pretty full in there. Everybody's going to bring their crowd. I love the atmosphere. It gives you that real March Madness atmosphere that I think sometimes you lose when, some of those first round games, when you're playing in Boise, Idaho, and it's, I don't know, just for argument's sake, it's Providence against UCLA in Boise, Idaho. And I'm like, well, nobody from either team is even there. So this is just one of those times where you get together. This tournament is just going to be so difficult, but fun. And I think, and it is for the fans, and I just love it that the simple fact that everybody's going to be there gunning, ready to win, ready to play. Hopefully we get the officiating that will allow them to do their thing. So if we get that, it'll be great. So I appreciate you guys joining us, man. I thank you guys for coming on. As always, we'll bring you back
For sure.
as many times as you guys want to come back. I promise you that. We'll take one last break here from our partners at Synergy Financial. But until then, I'll see you guys, man. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right. Just before we end the show, look, I know we bashed on officiating today, and I know it's fun to do that at home. It's fun to do that, when you're watching a game and get around your buddies. It's fun to bash on officiating, and then also be frustrating. But that's not necessarily the goal of what we were trying to do today, is just to bag on officials. We just like the consistency. As a fan, you love the consistency of what's going on. We just want to make sure that everything is on a level playing field. So number one, the best product can be put out there. But number two, so the kids understand what they need to do and what's going on. Having to adjust to somebody else anyway during a basketball game is already difficult. But then having to adjust on top of that to different officiating from half to half, or maybe TV timeout to TV timeout. It just can become mind-numbing. So that's all we were doing today. We're just wanting to talk about it, see how we can get some consistency with the officiating. Again, the one thing to remember about all of this, people, officials are human too. So nobody's perfect, and nobody's expecting them to be perfect. We just want the consistency for them to try to get it right. So we appreciate everybody joining us. Remember, Big 12's Insiders, Monday or Tuesday through Friday at 1 p.m. Central Time. Remember, the K-State Insiders is on Monday at the same time, all on YouTube. Remember to go subscribe, like, comment, give the thumbs up at gopowercat.com. We appreciate everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. See if we can do it better. Bye-bye.
This has been a gopowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.